Welcome to the Maritime Executives podcast series, In the Know. I'm Tony Munoz, Editor-in-Chief. Our Executive Corner podcast will provide conversations with top executives concerning events and issues that are shaping our industry today. We will also bring you up to speed with the latest news and editorials covered by the Maritime Executive. Today we're speaking with Bill Doyle. Bill, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing right now.
So I'm the current Executive Director and CEO for the Dredging Contractors of America. Previously, I was a U.S. Federal Maritime Commissioner, and with relation to the ILA and the USMX contract negotiations, I know all the parties. I know labor. I regulated the ocean carriers, the largest ones in the world that are involved, also the marine terminal operators, the MTOs, and for 3 years, I also was the Executive Director for the Port of Baltimore, where I dealt at an operational level with the ocean carriers, the marine terminal operators, and the shippers, people who put the vessel on the vessel, the goods, the importers and exporters, all up and down the supply chain.
Yeah. So you say you just came back from the Gulf Coast and they're picketing in the Gulf Coast. You just arrived in Baltimore. They're picketing in Baltimore. You know, what seems to be the sticking point? What is it all about automation? What is the reality?
Yeah, I did. I just came back from the Gulf Coast. I was in Houston. I was in Galveston. I did see the picket signs. They went up midnight when I was there. And then, going into the meetings that we had all day yesterday into the morning and into the daylight hours. And then, of course, I flew back today into BWI and I went by the Port of Baltimore, Dundalk Marine Terminal, Seagirt Marine Terminal, the gates. Met with the local president, Scott Cowan of the ILA, talked to all the guys that I know from the union that I met, had relationships for 3 years. It was good to see him. It's peaceful. But, the union's dug in, okay? And wages is only one part of the issue.
Sure.
Okay? But when you look at the wages are negotiable. And that's what they're negotiating right now. Now, to my understanding, as of an hour ago, and this is 3:00 in the afternoon, the union had put forward a proposal across the table to management that hasn't been responded to yet. Okay, so that's good news. All right, they may not be sitting at the table, but there is paper going back and forth across the table, and that's a negotiation. The big issue is automation. I mean, automation, if anyone knows Harold Daggett, and I know Harold Daggett, one thing he's not is quiet when he has a position. Now, I saw Harold Daggett in 2016 at the old Sparrows Point shipyard under the Obama administration when I was a federal maritime commissioner. He came in, they were getting ready to graze the land there at the old Sparrows Point and build a maritime facility.
Yeah.
He was talking automation at that point. How are we going to get jobs? How is this going to work for humans? So he's been talking about automation for well over a decade. And now he's at the table and he's saying, look, humans need to do the work. We don't want to be replaced by machines. We've all seen in the news and from the administration, AI, artificial intelligence, automation. It's everywhere. And these guys want to protect their jobs. And as a union, your job is to preserve your job. So it's job preservation is on the table as well.
So you have the stevedores, you have the dock workers, and the dock workers are, I know there was a big issue about using scanners back in Oakland many years ago. They would scan the containers. The union didn't like that. They wanted somebody to walk along and write down those container numbers. That was a big issue back then. They solved that problem. I believe Condoleezza Rice flew out to solve that issue. So what kind of automation are they concerned about?
Well, they would be concerned with all of that, Tony. You can the most visual that anyone could imagine is a crane operator. Okay, the guys want to operate the cranes. Humans; those are ILA jobs.
Right.
Operating the crane, take the containers off the ship, and put them on. Then you have yard hustlers. Yard hustlers are what move the containers in and around the port, in between the stacks, on the stacks, and then you have the reaches, and you have that machinery. You even have the forklifts. So those are all done by humans right now. All of the interface and interaction of containers, of automobiles. Let's not forget about the automobiles.
Yeah.
The longshoremen drive the automobiles on and off the ships. They drive the farm equipment on and off the ships. So they're really concerned about where this AI is heading, where this automation is heading, and they were trying to negotiate that into this contract. What I will say is this: in the existing collective bargaining agreement, there is a clause in that contract. It's called New Technology Committee. If management, if the operators of the marine terminals or the ocean carriers would like to introduce a type of automation or semi-automation, they're required to go to the union first. Discuss that with the union and get the union's acquiescence in order to move forward. Tony, I don't think that that's happened. I think what's happened is the ILA and some of the ports have found this automation come into fruition without ever knowing about it. Sometimes it's months, even a year later, they're like, well, what is going on here? Right. So, tightening of that language, having discussions around that language will probably benefit and move these negotiations along.
So were we coming to the end of a contract? Are we in the negotiations of a new contract, or is it a work stoppage because of a particular issue? I mean, I understand the automation issue, please. I do understand that. But what provoked this particular strike?
The contract expired at midnight Tuesday, yesterday. Okay. So Monday, the 30th, going into Tuesday, October 1st, the contract expired. Okay. And that was a 6-year contract.
Okay.
They're trying to negotiate another 6-year contract. And where it got hung up was on, wages, automation. There are some other particulars in there related to benefits, such as pensions, and, they have a royalty program. Those are but the biggest ones, at least coming from Harold and, the guys, the union officials on the dock, particularly in Baltimore, is automation. They don't want to lose their jobs. They want,
of course.
And I've seen all the comments on Twitter and everything. And, you look at people on X, you look at people going back and forth, and you'll have one guy, he'll say, well, automate it all, robots can't strike. And then the other guy comes back and says, yeah, well, robots don't buy food or provisions. So it's like, okay, that's where we're at right now on some of this automation. It's like, okay, you can automate everything. And you can have a society that does nothing. And then how do they earn their money to pay for things and goods? So it's a very tricky situation. And I would say that, at least in the United States of America, and what the ILA's point is, look, if China wants to automate, have at it. Automate to your heart's content. Automate everything in China. But when those goods come to the United States, we're not going to be automated. We will have workers and we will have humans doing the job. So they're not particularly interested when somebody says, well, the world's moving to automation. Great, let them move to automation. But we're the United States, we're the ports, we're the gateways, and we're going to do the work. That's their argument.
Yeah, and it's been that way for quite some time. Labor, especially Mr. Daggett and his group, are very powerful. Is the ILWU along the West Coast joining the strike?
No, they are not joining the strike. And by law, they can't, okay? Because that's, what's known as secondary boycotts. They are in their contract provisions. So that's a good point, Tony, that you bring up, because product is still going to come into the United States. It will come in through the West Coast. It will come in through Canada. And to some extent, it'll come in through Mexico and then via truck or some of the rail lines that come from Mexico into Kansas City. Okay, so you're still going to have goods coming into the United States. It's just not going to be, as much or as frequent every day that this strike goes on. Okay. One thing that the retailers did, and when I say the retailers, I'm talking about the box stores, is they front end loaded. They saw this coming 4 or 5 months ago.
Right.
So they front end loaded. All your distribution, sorting, and fulfillment centers at Amazon, FedEx, Floor & Decor, Wayfair, they're all full. Okay. They're all full of product. Now, as the ships stop moving on the Eastern Gulf Coast, you have a depletion. So you're going to have those distribution centers start moving their product into the box stores, into the consumer who's buying on the phone or on their app on their phone, and then you'll start seeing the knock-on effect. Who's affected though on the Eastern Gulf Coast? a lot of your truckers, right? So you're going to see truckers, that come in and pick up the goods every day. I think that some of the farmers, okay, and your agriculture, so we export agriculture. Agriculture, that has a shelf life.
Yeah.
And if you're exporting
Right.
that agriculture, if you can't freeze it and store it, it spoils. So, I feel for what's going on here. And, my point is, all right, let's get this negotiation on. Okay. Let's get this concluded because there are some knock-on effects that are going to hurt businesses, small businesses, workers such as truckers, and our farm industry.
No question about it. And in fact, you have a national election coming up, and the impacts of the impact on that on the economy is going to be tremendous. Um, so we are from New York to the Gulf of Mexico on strike.
Yeah, basically, how the ILA's jurisdiction work is it runs from Maine to Texas.
Okay.
If all the way to Houston, Galveston, Corpus Christi. I'm not sure if they have it, but it's the whole jurisdictional area. Definitely containers and definitely ro. Now, what's not affected, okay, and this is I wish I said this on a couple of other podcasts, is your energy industry. Okay, so your oils,
Right.
your condensate, all of that. That's not ILA jurisdiction. Most of them are docks and terminals that basically operate with their own personnel on their own property that they own.
Right.
Okay, and you know that's just hooking up hoses and manifolds and taking lines and putting it around a cleat. Everything else after that, is either from a tank on a pipe into the ship. So all of the energy, your oil, diesel, crude oil, exports, natural gas, that's all moving. That is not affected by this job action.
So we're primarily talking about containerized ships, container ships
And
at the dock with stevedores moving the freight in and out across the
the
dock
railroads, and the railroads,
and the
and the
road.
roll carriers,
Yeah.
right?
So it is
Now,
impacting the railroads as well, the car carriers.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
they were shut down as well. I saw a few of them in the port of Baltimore today, sitting at the dock. Now, what the ILA did do, Tony, and I think you'll appreciate this, longtime reporter and advocate for the maritime industry, especially the U.S. maritime industry, is
Right.
that the ILA exempted from this strike military cargo movement on commercial container ships. Basically, that's your MSP ships, your maritime security program for ships.
Right.
The U.S. flag, military, government impelled cargo. The ILA is moving that cargo, so those ships can come in and out. Okay. What they also did was exempt the cruise ships, and the cruise ships
Okay.
they have to book their vacations 18 months. Consumers 18 months, 2 years in advance. Plus, the ILA, the workers understand that cruise ships were shut down longer than any vessels in the maritime industry during COVID. They were shut down the longest.
That's
Their
right.
longshoremen weren't able to work those ships for that period of time. So they recognized that and said, okay, we're going to work all cruise ships too. So the ILA has jurisdiction on cruise ships. They're going to allow that to continue.
That's good. That's good. That was one of the questions we wanted to know. Would that impact the passenger vessels? Okay. So the are there options for the ships to go to other ports? We mentioned Canada, Mexico. I mean, are those things under consideration? Is that on the table with the negotiations? Listen, we'll move to other ports. This is a big deal with labor. So they could shut down the entire economy on the East Coast, Gulf, not affecting passenger vessels or liquid chemicals or fuels. So it's mostly containerized cargo. Now, you also mentioned that a lot of the Christmas people have already moved a lot of their cargoes into the warehouses and things of that nature. So we're talking about perishables. That's a primary thing. Is that being affected?
Perishables will be affected.
They will be
Okay.
affected.
Yeah, it will be affected. Whether it's refrigerated. Now, if it's refrigerated, you can keep goods refrigerated in a
Right.
container
On a
with
ship.
refrigerated
Right.
containers. All right. But the production at the farm still continues. And
Right.
they rely on the fact that those goods are going to get on ship and move out. That's they're not just in time, they're just in ripe. All right. So when it's ripe, it's got to go. And they move their product out. So that will be affected to some extent. Now, which ports are those? All right. So that's Wilmington, Delaware, and that's Port of Philadelphia. Huge imports of what I would say is your produce from, South America.
Right.
Okay. Now you can get some of that in through Mexico and then truck up and, go back the same way, truck down and put on a vessel. That works. But on the export side, it's going to be very difficult, to export
Right.
goods out of the United States unless you do it, you can do it because it works. They do it, meaning
Yeah.
chicken, beef growers, you can rail it to the West Coast. Okay. That option is there. Now, as for you saying and asking about, are there contingency plans in place? Ships that were destined for the East Coast can go to the West Coast, can go to Canada, but they're gonna have to get in line, right?
Yeah. Right.
Probably they're gonna have to get in line. They're gonna have to either go through the Panama Canal or under South America
Yeah.
to get over to the West Coast. And what they're gauging right now, the ocean carriers themselves, the international ocean carriers, is all right, can we get this thing done? Let's go on the hook. Let's go to anchor. Let's go anchor off the East Coast. Let's anchor at the federal anchorage. I saw those ships lining up yesterday off of Galveston Beach.
Wow.
I could see the hooks, so vessels were going on the hook before they come into the Houston Ship Channel. So the
Right.
companies are going to have to, the ocean carriers are going to have to, take a look at that and say, okay, is this going to be a long haul or are we only in this for a week? If you're in it for a week or 10 days, it's not worth the expense and time to go through the Panama Canal, get over to the
Of
West
course.
Coast, get in line, or go to Canada. Okay. So, that's the importance of these negotiations getting back into fruition.
Yeah. Any ship that goes into Anchorage and is being delayed is costing a lot of money, not only crew time, but everything else. And then there's a mad rush to get to the dock. Usually the
Right.
rotation of ships coming in is pretty coordinated, and now
Right.
you've got now you've got a bunch of ships in Anchorage waiting to get into the dock. So that's pretty incredible. Do you think the strike will go on? I mean, what is your sense? Since I mean, is the union sitting down with like on the West Coast, they have the Pacific Maritime Association that deals with that. Well, who do they have on the East Coast in terms of carriers? Is there an association that represents all of the liner services?
Yeah, and that's what's known as USMA. So that's called the United States Maritime Alliance,
Okay.
USMA. Okay.
Yes, I mean,
It's basically the same ones as the PMA,
yeah.
right? So I mean, let's go through it. It's Costco, China Ocean Shipping Company. It's Maersk, right? It's Mediterranean Shipping Company. It's Hapag-Lloyd. It's One, the Japanese
Right.
group, Ocean Network Express. It's CMA CGM. So, and then you have some marine terminal operators that are mixed in there. And we know that the marine terminal operators now, usually, most of them have an ocean carrier somewhere in the mix that
Right.
has a stake or that owns stock or has an ownership interest. So that's who it is on that. Now, you know, I've been criticized and people have said to me, Bill, you spoke too soon. I'm like, no, I've been a federal maritime commissioner. If I had a question, if I had something that I needed to happen, I don't go to a middleman. I go to the top. I go to the owner of the ocean carrier company. I go to the CEO if it's a publicly traded company, and I call them into my office. And that's something that I think if that goes well, the government. Now, we saw what President Biden's statement that he put out. It was very strong. Some of these carriers, ocean carriers, should be called in. They're reasonable businessmen.
They're businessmen, first,
Businessmen,
first
reasonable.
and foremost.
Okay,
Yeah.
all of them are, and I know them. And Harold Daggett, there is no one above Harold Daggett. He's the top. There's no bump up. There's no UMSMX for Harold Daggett. He's the head of the union. He runs a strong union. He runs a union that overwhelmingly 99% support him. So, I think, in order to move this, the owner's got to get in the room, the CEOs, top dogs, and get this thing done. I think if that happens, this thing should be over by Sunday.
So are they negotiating? Are they coming to the table? That's the most important question. If there's no communication going on between each other, now you're in a stalemate. We don't want to be in a stalemate. We can't afford to be in a stalemate. So are they speaking, best of your knowledge?
Yes, and that's what I had alluded to earlier in the beginning of the conversation, is that the ILA sent a response, terms and conditions. Okay, so they presented a counteroffer to the management group last night. As of an hour and a half ago, the management group hadn't gotten back to the union yet. That's what I was told from the union. Okay, so it's being reviewed. That's my hope. I'm an optimist. All right. Well, management's reviewing it. Okay. Hopefully they're reviewing it. But after that, you got to get the big guys, the owners.
Yeah, that's right. Well, listen, Bill, you're right on top of this, and I appreciate you spending some time with us.
Sure.
Do you have any commentary that you'd like to say before we close this out? Because, catching up with you is tough, and I want to make sure that I have an opportunity to get all that's, in your emotions and in your daily work from here on out until this thing ends.
Yes. Well, I mean, what I'd say is that, look, these are sophisticated parties on both sides of the table. Okay. I mean, some people the union knows exactly what they're doing. The ocean carriers and marine terminal operators, they know exactly what they're doing. They know what the stakes are here, and they know how long the supply chain can last. Every day we go through this, it's going to get more and more, I'd say, unstable. Okay. For the economy, for the consumer. And they know that. And I think that, Tony, we'll keep in touch, but let's give it another 24 hours and see what comes back. I think that things will work out in the end.
Good. Thanks for your time.
All right. Thank you, sir.